I have gotten my time and I can do the things to secure their job and really sort of live the life that I love. And so I'm happy where I am in life. I have stress, but I don't have the type of stress that cripples me. I have the type of stress that invigorates me.
Wow, that is a powerful story there, man. But the other point there is no matter how much we plan, life's going to be throwing us curveballs.
Exactly. And you need to when I never thought I'd have 45 employees. I never wanted it. I never thought I would. But each one is in their own individual. I have another employee overseas who is going through fertility treatments. And, we're trying to be supportive of her and do what she needs to do so that she could have a child with her spouse. And, it's all of those things. It's taking people where they are and saying, we're trying to do something together. And I know my people have the business, the firm, they're going to do the right thing by the firm. But I also want them to have a life where they can do the right thing by themselves and the right thing by the firm.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. This is a podcast where I get to interview law firm owners so I can learn about their past successes and maybe mistakes too. And you get to listen and hopefully learn as well. Really excited about today's guest. This is somebody that I have been following from afar for many, many years, but just now actually got to meet today, and that's Jay Ruane. He's a criminal defense lawyer and firm owner. And Jay, welcome to the podcast, and maybe tell us a little bit more about your firm and what you're doing.
Sure. So thank you for having me. I've actually listened to your podcast for a while too, so it's cool to finally make the connection. And talking about my successes, I think we're mainly going to focus on my failures because I am an open book when it comes to those. I think that's where we learn the most. Anybody can brag, but if you can, unveil where you went wrong, I think that's where we can all learn to be better in trial work, in representing clients, and also in scaling our firms. But, I've been a criminal defense lawyer now for nearly 28 years, which is mind blowing to say that. I never thought I was going to last this long. But in reality, I started my practice as a public defender in 1998, right out of law school. I got a job making $100 a day as a public defender, and I was hustling. And this is back late 90s, the height of the drug game. I was a street lawyer, and that's really, that's how I cut my teeth. I got into private practice after I got passed over for a job. Then I hung a shingle on my own. Eventually, a year and a half later, joined up with my father, who separated from his partner at the time. And I said, I need security. And the only way to get security in this business is to have a business and actually focus on the business. My father, I liken him to being in business with Pablo Picasso. He doesn't want to know a thing about business. All he wants to do is paint. For him, it was all he wanted to do was try cases and be a criminal defense lawyer. But I like the finer things, I guess. I like having food in the fridge and my bills paid, and I like taking nice vacations when I get to take them. So I said, I need to build this into a business. And that's where I put my head down and really started to focus and pay attention. And, we're blessed now that there's all these podcasts and these Facebook groups and Slack communities and all that stuff. But when I started doing this in 99 and 2000, there was nothing. And so I would go, I was single. I had a dog. That was my only responsibility. I would go to the local Borders bookstore and see what new business books were out. And I would buy a business book or two and a couple of business magazines every week. And that was how I learned how to do all this stuff. And so that's me.
Yeah, I mean, definitely I want to talk about that. I remember, way back when there's the Bible, what is it, Thunberg or whatever?
Yeah.
That
which I never read. I bought. Yeah. My Amazon card tells me that I bought it. I can't find it, and I don't ever remember reading it.
He's talking about typewriters and fax machines and, but yeah, that's the thing. So, back in the day, like you said, now there's a guru everywhere. There's stuff everywhere. If you want to find it, you can. I mean, sort of the problem nowadays, I feel like, is sort of information overload. You don't know what is good, what is bad, what should you follow, what should you not. But back then, there wasn't really anything at all. So, how did you do it? I mean, you said you went to libraries. I mean, we looking outside the law?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
there was nothing in law. There was nothing in law. I mean, well, that's not true. I know I read John Morgan's book years ago, and I was really impressed with that. And I remember eating Farazi's Never Eat Alone because I knew, back then it wasn't as big as reliance on digital. So I read that book, and I read Seth Godin's Purple Cow. And I was like, this is how we have to do it. We have to be different. And then, I was lucky enough to be pointed in the direction of the niche of DUI defense within criminal law. And those are clients who tend to have more money, tend to have higher stakes in their cases. And so I threw myself, not only into the business of law, but also into in the criminal aspect, the most profitable niche. And so my first decade was focusing on being the best in my state in that niche. I still have that reputation. At least I think I do. And for me, it was really, I wanted to know the field sobriety tests and the breath testing machines and the blood testing machines because I wanted to be the best. And then I started to say, okay, well, now that I've got this knowledge and we've got the caseload, what else can I do? And I said, I'm going to throw myself into really getting into the business of how to run a firm the right way. And, for me as a criminal defense lawyer, we don't get those, big home run hits and that type of thing that PI gets where you can dump $50,000 at the end of the year into something for the next year. I had to do it, small bites at a time. So I never had a big budget to throw into something. So I was doing a lot of stuff bootstrapping, just figuring out myself. If there was something out there that I wanted to do, I figured out how to do it cheaper. And I think that's one of the things that's helped me is that, I grew up in an inner city. We didn't have everything that we wanted, but we figured out to get what we needed. I mean, I can remember playing basketball with a milk crate with the bottom cut out of it tacked to a telephone pole. That's what we did in our neighborhood. So we figured stuff out, and I've done the same thing in my firm.
Sometimes it's the constraints that actually allow you to grow the way you should. But, I, like I said, I've been following you and your stuff. And one thing that I get a strong sense about you is sort of you're a lifelong learner. And I could see where once you sort of figured out the DUI stuff, you're like, I got to go figure out something new to learn. But let's talk about your firm for a second. So, my understanding is you got the biggest criminal defense firm in the state of Connecticut. How many lawyers do you have now?
I think we're 12 now. We had somebody who we thought was going to pass the bar, didn't. She's going to take it again this summer. So that'll take us to 13.
And so my sense is, just from knowing a lot of lawyers and representing lawyers over the years, that, number one, scaling a firm is tough, just period, from starting from nothing. But scaling a criminal firm, there just doesn't seem to be that many big criminal defense firms around. And I'm curious, do you know why that is or?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can speak to that. The only other bigger firms that I know of, I know there's Stephen Hamilton and DeAndre Grant in Texas. They have separate firms. At one point, they were partners and they separated and they continue to scale. Both great business-minded attorneys. That's really it. I mean, Seth's got a criminal wing of his firm in D.C. with Price Benowitz, but it's not just a criminal firm like our three firms that I mentioned. I think part of the problem with scaling criminal is, number one, it's an incredibly lawyer-centric type of law. People, you can't have a paralegal doing 99% of the stuff and the lawyer showing up for a deposition and a trial, right? The lawyer has to make all of the court appearances with the client. The client could be going to jail and wants to talk to the lawyer, doesn't want to talk to the paralegal. We have to get paid up front, which is an incredible hurdle compared to other things. And one of the challenges with getting paid up front is, number one, people don't like paying for their mistakes. They'd have no, if I, and I definitely do not, so if my wife is listening, I absolutely do not want to get divorced. But if I wanted to get divorced, I want it, I'll find the money for it. If you get arrested, you don't want to have been arrested. You're not going to find the money for something. I mean, I've had plenty of clients who've been like, well, I just took a vacation. I don't have the money to pay you. I'm like, well, what are you talking about? I'm the one who's keeping you out of jail. And they're like, right, but I wanted a vacation. Nobody wants to be talking to me. And so that's difficult. So you have to build in. I mean, right now, I think I've got nearly $700,000 of accounts receivable. Now I have a team that I've put in place to make sure that we track it. That's one of my biggest mistakes, was not putting that team into place sooner. But, between needing to get paid up front, needing to have a lawyer do the majority of the work. I think that's one of the hardest parts of scaling a criminal practice.
Yeah, that good point. Do you think there's any lawyer personality elements too? So,
Oh yeah.
you've got these gunslinger, I'm a trial lawyer, I'm sort of a solo guy by nature. Do you think there's an element of that as well?
Well, yeah. I mean, the criminal defense bar tracks the most dysfunctional lawyers for the most part. I mean, I can name right now off the top of my head a half a dozen lawyers who flamed out because of, they I guess you could say they flew too close to the sun, right? They were partaking of some of the substances that maybe their clients were dealing them. They had monetary issues. They just were sort of living by the seat of their pants. And unfortunately, because criminal is lawyer dependent, you can survive as just a true solo with a cell phone and hustle and scrape and make enough to, put food on your plate and pay your bills every week. But, some of those people just really walk that line. And so, I mean, even among my team, I mean, we're a bunch of misfits, like true misfits, but we all seem to work well together. So it kind of works out. And I have a mind for systems, and I need that because of my ADHD. So it tends to work out.
And so, lots of elements go into scaling a firm, but, I guess one element, you got to get cases, you got to be able to get the work. And then the others, you got to go get the people to service the cases. So, how have you sort of figured out both of those?
So when I hung my shingle, my father had another firm with one other partner. They had one associate, right? And when I quit my job, I walked into his office and I said, "Hey, I just quit." And he goes, "Good luck with that. I don't have any work for you. I'm scraping by myself." But he and the other guys in his office, they actually had another solo who was sharing space. They're like, "We got an empty office and a broken desk. You want to use that? Go for it." So they told me, "Okay, now you got to get in the phone book," because back then in '99, that's what people did. And I called up the rep and they said, "Well, this is great. We'd love to place an ad for you next year. The book closed 2 weeks ago and we can't get you in." So my brother had gotten home that month from college. He had taken a rudimentary HTML class. And I said, "Hey, how about we build a website and see what we can do?" And I mean, you can still see it on the Internet Archive. My first website was trash, but it started to generate me clients. And those clients were able to fund my scaling. And so I used Google pay-per-click for the first time in November of 2002. My first click cost me 7 cents. I mean, today, think about that. So, and I learned how to do it myself. I didn't have a vendor that I could go to. I said, "Look, I got time. I got no money. So I'm going to sit home at night and I'm going to teach myself this stuff." And, I still continue I'm teaching myself AI. I'm learning how to do that stuff better, even to this day. I think, I love learning new things. It excites me. And, that's really, I've been able to get more clients because I'm knowledgeable in the area. Other lawyers recognize that knowledge. I mean, I'll tell you, I gave a speech probably 2 years into the practice of law on how to defend a DUI case because I had started to make a name for myself. And I opened the speech it was to the statewide criminal defense lawyers organization. And I opened the speech with, "It's so great to see all of these great names." And I started naming people in the audience. And I said, "Every single one of you wouldn't give me a job 18 months ago. And now you're here learning from me. Boy, who made a big mistake, right?" And they all laughed. And
That's awesome.
but I just wanted to call them out for it. Like, none of you gave me a chance. I went through the criminal defense lawyers directory and I said every single one. I said, "I'm Jim Ruane's son. I'm looking for a job. I will work hard. Give me a chance." And I got dozens of rejection letters. And so I just had to do it on my own.
So let's talk about the early days of the internet. So a thought came to my mind. So, you put up this website, you said it's trash, but it probably was the only one for a criminal defense firm up at the time. So,
Absolutely.
And then pay-per-click was super cheap. So you probably got, it's almost like heroin. You're probably getting a lot of leads out of that for cheap, but then the game changed when everybody started coming in. So, this happens over and over and over. Sure. In any business where you get in early, you ride it, you really enjoy it, but eventually sort of the steam runs out. So how did you sort of maneuver out of that over time?
So the interesting thing about it is back in the early 2000s, there was a lot of federal money going into DUI, DWI enforcement. it was all over the news and that type of thing. So I happened to like build a website around the time that it was really growing. For example, back in 2000, and I looked this up recently, there were 18,000 DUI arrests in the state of Connecticut back in the year 2000. And we were opening probably 100. Like, I mean, there was plenty of opportunity there. Now, one of the challenges we have with criminal defense is we compete with people who go pro se and people who get the public defender. So there's a significant chunk of arrestees who will never, ever become clients to anybody. But last year in Connecticut, there was only like 5,000 DUI arrests. And so not only was competition increasing on the digital atmosphere because people started finding that, oh, I could put up a website and get some business out of it, but the available caseload was dropping at the same time. So I said, we can't just be a DUI firm. We have to expand again. I mean, my father was a general criminal lawyer. I narrowed us down to DUI. And then I said, about 15 years ago, we need to, I see a trend here. Changes in social structure and that type of thing. Now, obviously with, people, back then it was people staying home and taking pills. Now it's people staying home and smoking weed, at least in my state. And so I said, we need to do something different. So we started to expand. My first hire really wasn't another lawyer. My first hire was a content copywriter. There was a young woman who grew up across the street from my wife, who graduated, whose father was a local attorney. He did residential real estate. And she came out of college with an English degree. And her father said, what are you going to do with an English degree? And I said, well, are you looking for work? Because I could pay you like 30 grand a year to write content for me. And she was like, I'll take that job. And she's been with me now for 12 years. She actually left after 2 years and got a master's degree in technical writing and then came back to us and has been with us ever since. And it's been great. And it's interesting too, now with AI and AI tools and that type of thing, she said, you wouldn't need to hire me now. But now my experience and my degree in technical editing has really allowed me to scale our content creation. And so we're doing a lot more content now than ever before. But, I think last week we created 1 million words of content for our website. So we're still growing and pushing.
So I want to talk about that for sure. Maybe now is a good time. So you've got a podcast with Seth Price called The Law Firm Blueprint, which is really, really, really enjoy that one. And one of the things I really like about it is you guys go on there and maybe you each have a few questions and you just sort of spitball with each other live.
Literally, like we text each other 3 topics and that's it. Like there's live without a net, basically.
And it is really good. So anybody out there who's not following that needs to go follow that because it's really good. And the other thing is, I've learned a lot about you just from listening. So, which is cool. And so, one of the things on there, there's a few things I want to talk about, but one of them is your output of content. I mean, it's amazing number. I mean, you got help, you got AI, you got all this. But the other thing that amazes me is once you decide, it's like the speed at which you actually execute is amazing. And it's, you go on that podcast, I've heard you talk about, this past weekend, I put together dozens and dozens of scripts for these videos, blah, blah, blah. And then, they're in the queue. How did you get to that place? Somebody like me or anybody else who's like, okay, I want to get there. How do you get there?
I mean, I guess you could say I'm a bit of a loser. I don't really have any other hobbies. My hobby is trying to get this business to a place where it's sustainable and can afford me the lifestyle that I want. But, I guess I bake bread. That's my newest hobby and I'm learning to play guitar. So I guess that's a hobby, but I have a bias towards action. And I think, I can remember years ago, like, I'm trying to think, this was back definitely like 2003, 2004, 2005. I went out, I bought a teleprompter, I bought a camera, I had some friends, we were going to a conference in Vegas. I said, let's get ourselves a suite. We can set up the camera, we can film a bunch of videos. Some of my videos from them are still on YouTube and still get views. I mean, it's a long time ago. I edited them in iMovie. They look like absolute trash. And one of my other friends that was there was like, I don't like the way I look. I don't like the script. I had to look off camera once. I need to be more polished. I want to do it in the studio. I don't like the lighting. And he still doesn't have any videos online. Now, this is 20 years later. Like, he doesn't have any videos online. And I've got hundreds, if not thousands, because it's just a bias towards action, man. I know I'm gonna, but here's the thing, right? Like I put up videos in 2003 and they looked like trash. Back then they looked okay, not great. They certainly weren't high end production, but we've learned how to make our productions look better by doing it, messing it up, and getting better at it. So you can see the progression. I had that bias towards action, so I've gotten better at doing things. If someone else were to start now, they would not have had that time to figure out how to do it. And now they have to spend so much more money on bringing in a high-end editor and, that type of thing. And so I think it's my bias towards action is I jump at things early in the process, maybe too early, but by doing that, I can fail or at least look ugly, and it's still somewhat acceptable. And because it's new. I mean, I put out a podcast during COVID because we had nothing else going on. And the podcast has like 100,000 downloads. And it's just, hey, here are the scripts, read them into the microphone, send me the microphone. And it's not a well-produced podcast, but it's still ranking and it gets stuff. And it's all about the criminal process in Connecticut. And all my old associates, 90% of them aren't even with me anymore, but their voice is still voicing a season of the podcast because I just said, I got to take action.
This, but most lawyers are sort of scared of making mistakes, scared of looking stupid. So they just do nothing. It reminds me of, I don't know, Mr. Beast, whatever's his name is, where he basically said, first 100 are going to suck.
Yeah.
You just got to know the first 100 are going to suck and you just get a little bit better on each one. You just got to start somewhere.
For me too, is I knew shit was going to suck. Like I knew that it was not going to look great. I mean, and it wasn't going to sound great and it wasn't going to be scripted well. But I also, and maybe this is just, I was a different type of law student. I graduated from college, came back to where I live, started working in a bar, worked my way through law school in a bar, made my friends in my hometown. I commuted an hour each way for night school, for law school. I didn't partake in the law school community because I knew I was going to be back in my hometown practicing law. So I thought it was more beneficial to me to maintain my local connections. And I'll tell you right now, Marty and Buka, my bartender friends from back in the day, when I was broke college student, I could go to their bar and go out and have a beer or two and they would always cover me. And they're still my friends. Like I still hang out with them and talk to them regularly. I don't care what other lawyers think about me because they're not my social circle. My friends are bartenders, salesmen, that type of thing. And I think a lot of lawyers are afraid about what other lawyers might think about them. That's never been me. I don't really care what other lawyers think of me. I don't care what judges think of me. I know I'm doing right. It's funny. I ran my first billboard, back in that day, back in 2000, 2001. And I still get judges calling me the billboard lawyer. Now, if you look around my state, every PI lawyer in the state has multiple billboards up. But I'm still the billboard lawyer to these local judges because I basically had my name and a phone number and said DWI defense on it. Like I don't have campaigns, I don't have all that stuff. And I haven't done billboards in forever. But, I'm willing to take a chance when other people aren't.
That's a great point. So you've tried a lot of stuff. You've tried a lot of stuff. Some work, some
radio,
doesn't.
Billboards, digital. I've done it all.
So, and I know things change over time, but what without giving us your secrets, what's sort of your current sort of stack? What is it that's really generating for you?
Well, I'll give the secret away because nobody's doing it. I've been doing it now for 5+ years. In fact, it's interesting though. I actually went to a vendor because I didn't know how to do it. And I was like, I'm kind of busy. Let me get a vendor to do this for me. And they couldn't figure out how to do it. They weren't doing what I wanted them to do. So then I said, screw it. I'll spend a Saturday morning and I'll teach myself. And I taught myself. I watch a bunch of YouTube videos. If you're not using YouTube pre-roll ads as a lawyer, they're 15-second unskippable pre-roll ads. You are doing yourself the biggest disservice on the planet. I love YouTube pre-roll unskippable ads. They say YouTube is going to go to a 30-second unskippable ad. I can't wait for that because you're getting in front of your target audience in your community for 15 seconds before you get to the video that they want to see. I've served over like 17 million of these in the last 5 years. And we are getting so many people that are calling us now being like, dude, you're everywhere. I can't turn on YouTube without seeing your ad. And there's some things that you can do. You can set it up so that they also run on YouTube TV, and you can avoid it being on apps and being on websites that, the blippy website that you're never going to get a client from. So there's refinements that you can make to your campaign. But I am so bullish on YouTube pre-roll ads, and I got everybody in my mastermind doing them, and they're seeing great results. And it's great to build brand so freaking cheap, man. So cheap. I mean, I'm getting views for, 0.2 of a cent for someone to watch 15 seconds about me. I mean, in my home state, what's better than that?
Wow. That's awesome. So, okay, so I want to shift. So we've talked a little about, scaling a firm, getting the clients. The other part is, building the team. And so, how do you keep folks happy? And I mean both staff and attorneys. And I asked that question, but I'll maybe give a little context. I think on one of your podcasts, so a while back, you sort of talked about you had a longtime staff person that back in the day, you sort of gave them, I call it a special deal about maybe they got Fridays off during the summer because they had childcare, but their kids grown up out of the house, they don't need the childcare anymore. And you said, we got to dial that back. And they're like, wait a second, no. But then you've got that, and then you got to balance that with all your other newer employees that don't have the deal. So, things change over time. So how do you keep everybody happy?
It's tough. And, I actually took some advice from Seth, and I kept the Friday days off for that longtime employee. And it's interesting. It's funny. Well, it's not funny that we're talking about this now. That was like a struggle for me a month ago. And I was like, how do I deal this? And then last week, that longtime employee's 18-year-old son just graduated from high school a month ago, was driving from Florida to South Carolina to go see his girlfriend, fell asleep at the wheel, drove off the highway, died in a single car accident. And so we've now been dealing with that as a firm.
Oh my gosh.
So we said to the employee, look, I said to her, listen, I got you. You take as long as you need. I don't expect you to come back anytime soon. I know you're going to be dealing. She's a single mom of 3 boys. She just went actually yesterday to pick up her son's roommates. And so I think the good thing about my firm is that we allow each client the grace, each staff member the grace of what they need. I try to be very, very in tune with what they need as employees. And so what I gave to one, I may not give to others, but I'll give the others what they need. And I'll probably catch something from, HR or from an employment lawyer saying, you can't treat people differently. But in reality, what Krista needed at that time and now needs is different from what one of my Ashleys, I have 2 different Ashleys, but one of my Ashleys needs. And so what she needs or they need, I'm going to find a way to make that happen. And so I think everybody sort of appreciates that. And I have said to everybody, when they come here at my annual meetings, I say, look, you are never going to make $1 million working at this law firm, but we are going to make it possible and beneficial for you to have the family or the personal life that you want, and you can travel, or you can stay at home with your kids, or you can volunteer at your school, or you can coach a team. Like, we will make that happen, and we will work around your life's needs so that you have a fully connected life to all the aspects that you want to do. And I think everybody sort of appreciates that. And I was being short-sighted. I was like, I want to get more work out of her. I'm paying her $90,000 a year. She should work more than 4 days a week. And then in the grand scheme of things, I could call her up. I could call her up today and say, hey, Krista, I need this. And she would drop preparing for the funeral for her son to do what she needed to do for me. I know she is a ride or die, so I need to be ride or die for my people as well. And that's just my philosophy. And I don't make the kind of money that other lawyers make, and I'm okay with that. I have gotten my time, and I can do the things to secure their job and really sort of live the life that I love. And so I'm happy where I am in life. I have stress, but I don't have the type of stress that cripples me. I have the type of stress that invigorates me.
Wow, that is a powerful story there, man. But the other point there is no matter how much we plan, life's going to be throwing us curveballs.
Exactly. And you need to when I never thought I'd have 45 employees. I never wanted it. I never thought I would. But each one is in their own individual. I have another employee overseas who is going through fertility treatments. And, we're trying to be supportive of her and do what she needs to do so that she could have a child with her spouse. And, it's all of those things. It's taking people where they are and saying, we're trying to do something together. And I know my people have the business, the firm, they're going to do the right thing by the firm. But I also want them to have a life where they can do the right thing by themselves and the right thing by the firm. And if there's ever a conflict, then come to me and honestly say, this isn't the place for me anymore. And we just had an employee leave on Friday who was great. She started in January and she made it 6 months. Great person, good employee. But the conversation was, I'm an introvert. I'm working remote. I'm in my house. If I don't leave my house for a job, I can go weeks without talking to anybody outside of the firm. I need to have some sort of social interaction. Otherwise, it's not healthy for me. I have to leave this job, even though I love it. Awesome. I'm happy you recognize that. You can move on. And we'll figure it out. And you're part of the Alumni Association now.
So you mentioned something else a minute ago that I also have heard you talk about more than once, I think, on your podcast. And that is, you're not there trying to squeeze out every last dollar of profit. So you have overhired, or you have extra attorneys to make sure they are there, and you, Jay, don't have to actually, do all this detailed attorney work. And so, I commend you on that. I think that is knowing yourself, and it's, back, maybe it's the Dan Martell buy back your time kind of concept, but it's like, you want this to be enjoyable for you, and that extra squeezing out that extra dollar profit, it's not worth it to you. And there's not many people out there that are taking that approach.
Well, there's different types of profit, right? I enjoy and I profit from being able to have dinner with my kids every night. That's important to me, and I get a benefit from it. Yes, it's not cash in my pocket, but I get that. And I know my team makes that happen for me. And so I've deliberately decided to overhire. We have one extra staff member who's cross-trained on everything. And we are in the process of adding that extra lawyer. I have my chief operating officer is an attorney. And I know if I didn't want to go to court, I could say, you go. Now there are other situations. Like last year, Dave, one of my lawyers, his wife had a baby. He had just joined us. And then, 2 months later, his wife was having a baby. I told him, you have to take your time off. Like, that's a non-negotiable. You don't get that time back with a newborn. And so I stepped in and I covered some contingencies, and I loved it because I go to his courthouses. And so I'm so rarely, I try to avoid court like the plague. I show up there. I'm like, hey, I'm here on this file. And they look and they see our firm name on it. And they're like, oh, are you the new guy at Ruane's office? And I say, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. Dave's wife just had a baby. So can you give me a continuance? Like, I'll get you out of here. Don't stress, we'll kick this out for a couple of weeks and Dave will be able to handle it later. And I was like, awesome. Thank you so much. Because I really don't know what I'm doing. I haven't been trained yet. But that's the thing. Like, I'll go to court for that kind of stuff. I'm not taking cases anymore. I've handled thousands of cases and I just got burned out on that. So now I'm trying to do stuff that I can contribute to the firm that other people can't, because I have a vision. I have a way of looking at things. And so I think I serve the firm well in my capacity. But I could always jump in if I needed to.
Yeah. So the way I sort of talk about it is I think it's healthy for a firm to have what I call it slack. Yeah. If everybody is stretched to the absolute maximum or 100 or 110%, if you add anything new to it, something's going to break. But if you have some slack, you can push it around. And sometimes you get to, somebody leaves and you don't have the slack. But the goal is, in my opinion, for a healthy organization, law firm or not, is to have some slack in there so you can fill in where you need. Real quick, thanks for listening. If you're getting any value out of this podcast, please take 2 seconds to hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. It would really mean a lot to me. Now back to the show. So that leads me to my next question. You mentioned sort of, what it is you do now. So what is your role now? What's a typical week like for you? And
So I have a meeting at Tuesdays at 2:00 with my CRM developer. I started so long ago. The only thing that was out there in the space for managing lawyers' time was a server-based Time Matters. If anybody remembers Time Matters from 30 years ago. That was the only CRM that existed. And that was basically for civil firms, not for criminal. So one of my interns at the time had recently graduated from college, had some friends that were into database engineering. I said, why don't we build our own? Then we went out, we found a database developer. We've been with them now for 25 years. So I have a weekly meeting with my database team to update our CRM. So we have an in-house homebrewed CRM that does everything we needed to do, nothing we don't. And it costs me, probably $25,000 to $30,000 a year in improvements and in upgrades and stuff. But other than that, I'm not paying a per license, all that stuff. So that's been phenomenal. And then I have my leadership meeting 10 a.m.s on Thursday. Other than that, my week is wide open. I have no other requirements. So I have a 2-hour time block, 1 hour one day, 1 hour the other day. And then the rest of the day is do whatever you want, Jay. So I will go down the rabbit hole of, hey, how can I use AI to make my lawyers' lives easier? How can I make our representation better? I'm doing something now in my mastermind. We've used AI to develop a tool to do either a form interview, like a 60-question interview of the client, their background, their education, their family history, their mental health, all of that stuff. And then we use a good prompt and we upload it, and we get these 8 to 12 to 20 page mitigation reports. And those things are revolutionary because nobody's been doing stuff like that at scale using AI and getting so deep. I mean, we can run them through the PTSD social worker test, the anxiety one, the craft for substance abuse, all of those tests, and get a scoring that we can then supply to the courts and the prosecutors. And so I was able to develop all that stuff. And then I gave it to the people in my mastermind because they're also criminal defense lawyers all over the country. But I mean, I got a Slack message earlier today from one of my mastermind members who's in court right now and used the mitigation packet that the AI prompted. So literally, like, send the client the questions and upload it with the prompt, and you get a report. The lawyer takes less than 3 minutes of their time, and they're getting these 20-page documents, which are beautiful. He was in court this morning down in Florida, and he just took somebody from a felony with mandatory jail down to 2 misdemeanors with probation because of the mitigation packet that they put forward and his, advocacy. And he's like, this thing just is worth $1 million, because I could not have had the time to say, where could I take these and where could I go with this using AI if I didn't have the time freedom that I have because of my role. So I'm able to get creative. And I think that's one of my secret strengths is I look at things differently than most lawyers do because I don't define myself as an attorney. I define myself as a legal entrepreneur who happens to work in the criminal law firm space. And so that's really has been tremendous.
So I want to go down the AI path with you, but before we go there, you mentioned your mastermind. So tell me about that. So, there are lots of masterminds out there. You have one that's focused on criminal. How long have you been doing it? How many people are in it? How do you get in it? Tell me about it.
So it's simple. I was looking for, because I had so much time freedom. A couple of years ago, I started a social media marketing company for law firms called FirmFlex. And that started the September before COVID hit. And we had great momentum, and then COVID hit. And what was one of the first things that law firms cut was their social media marketing, because it was an easy thing to say, hey, let's cut this expense. So that business worked well for about a year and then slowly started to bleed out. And then I like anything, you lose interest, and my partners lost interest as well. They had businesses that were growing. And so we shuttered that last year, and I had some bandwidth, and my wife was pushing me, saying, you take these calls from these lawyers all over the country. Why don't you just do something with that? And I've been to John Fisher's mastermind. I love the idea of it. And I have been to PILMA. I've been to, all of these other PI focused groups. And I said, no one does this in criminal. In fact, I brought to some major criminal organizations and said, why aren't you doing anything about how to do this business better? And a lot of times the pushback was, if we talk about money, then people think of us as those scumbag lawyers who are just worried about getting paid and not focusing on the results. And I said, well, there's a way that you can have both and be balanced. But those organizations didn't want to do anything with business. So I just said at one point, screw it, I'm going to do it on my own. So I posted, I'm thinking about doing this mastermind. Is anybody interested in joining? I got 10 emails back. If you do that, I'm there. So I just decided, all right, what am I going to call this thing? Elite builder, blah, blah, blah. And I just was sitting around and I was like, the Criminal Mastermind. There you go. That's it, right?
Perfect.
It's the perfect name.
Yeah.
So I went out and darn it, the domain name was available. So actually a little over 3 years ago, I registered the domain name. My brother still builds websites. So I said, hey, throw me together a quick website. And I sent those people, and I still have, I was just looking at my membership list. Of the 10 people that sent me those emails, 8 of them are still members. One of them isn't a member because they became a judge. They're seeing value in our meetings, and we've been doing it. And I try to price it, so that people who are criminal defense lawyers, I'm not breaking the bank. Over the course of a year, it's like one case covers it. But I go out and I try to find the best subject matter experts to come in and speak to us twice a month. Sometimes I'll lead the lecture because it's something that I know, like coming up in a couple of weeks, I'm doing one about onboarding starts with the job post and how to really get your culture ingrained from the start when you start, bringing people in. But then I'll reach out and I'll bring in creative speakers. We've had people on SEO, digital marketing, hiring, firing, how to structure your business. We just had somebody on HR, but I'll go outside. Like I have people coming in on AI that are not related to the law field whatsoever. We did an AI thing 2 years ago with a woman who is an influencer in the AI space. And I reached out to her and we've maintained a relationship. She'll be coming back in 2026. But I even have somebody speaking in October about how to get the best value out of the points on credit cards. You're spending all this money on your credit cards and you're accumulating these points. How do you use them tactically to get the best value out of them? So, I'm trying to bring in speakers that can make a difference. So we do focus on intake and that type of thing, but it's all focused on criminal defense lawyer issues. So getting paid, how to get the right credit card processor, how to protect yourself so that you're not stuck trying a case for nothing, those types of things.
So I'm a criminal defense lawyer out there who's not in it, hasn't heard of it. How do I get in? Is there an application?
Just come to criminalmastermind.com, click apply, sign up right there, then and there. What we'll do is I'll do an onboarding with you. If it turns out that it's not the right place for you, there's no long-term commitments or anything like that. I'll just cancel you. Go have a nice day. If it's early enough in the process, I'll refund your money. Once you start, coming to sessions, obviously you got to pay for it because I pay to bring in the speakers. Like I don't let people come in and not get paid. That's important to me. And I don't have any sponsors. We're self-funded in that respect. Like, we're getting true unvarnished opinions from people. And it's been helpful, I think, to all the lawyers. A number of lawyers were, I do 50% criminal, but I also do, 25% residential real estate, 25% trust estates. And a lot of them have said, hey, because of the stuff that we've learned, I've been able to get rid of all the stuff that I didn't want to do that I was doing to keep the doors open. Now I'm doing all criminal and I'm loving it. And that's really helpful to me.
So what's the website?
thecriminalmastermind.com.
All right. Perfect. So I want to talk AI. I know I've been seeing you post on, Best Era. I've heard you talk about it. This is a rabbit hole that I'm starting to go down. I'm much farther behind than you, but there are lots of lawyers out there that are still scared as hell of this thing. Oh, there's a fake case. I can't even touch it. So let's go. So I guess you've been at it. How long have you been at it? And sort of what was your gateway into it? Was it ChatGPT like everybody else? Or
so ChatGPT launched and I signed up that very first day. I said, I got to check this thing out. And I, with fits and starts, I was like, oh, can you create me a script for this? And I got better at prompting. And really now what I'm finding is I like Claude in terms of the content it creates. That when I'm creating content, for example, I will defer to Claude as a better tool for that. But I'll use ChatGPT to help me parse out my prompts. So I'll say to him, here's what I want to do. How do I prompt it? And it'll give me, and then I'll refine the prompt multiple times in ChatGPT, and then I'll take it to Claude to execute. Or I'll take it from ChatGPT, to another AI tool to execute. So I have multiple accounts going at any one time because I think, it's good for me. Like, I mean, Grok has its limitations. I don't like the way it writes, but it has access to real-time data from X that you can't get in some of the other things. So everything has its place. I mean, just like, you might go to Chick-fil-A one day and you might go to Five Guys another day, or Shake Shack. Everything has its role. And so you should be using multiple AI platforms, I think, to get what you need out of all the. And I actually sent a Slack message last night to Ryan McKean, and I said, you could vibe code. Vibe coding is the ability to tell AI what you want in an app or what you want in the code, and it just does it for you. And so there's things like Rourke, which is a vibe coding platform. And I was messing around with it last week. I have a son who has ADHD, and so making sure that he gets all of his assignments done is very difficult because he forgets to write them down. So I coded him an app for his phone in an hour that we installed. And so now he's able to track all of his assignments, and he gets reminders, pings to be able to input the data and that type of thing. So I said to Ryan, I said, you could probably vibe code yourself your own custom CRM, tie it to your Google Drive, and never have to pay for a CRM ever again.
I saw somebody post on Twitter that the other day, basically said HubSpot, all these big, they're done. It's like, I vibe coded this thing, it's, so yeah. Now that's the thing that I'm seeing it, I'm watching the videos, and I'm completely overwhelmed. I'm like, how the hell do I personally get there? And so there's a lot of people out there that are even further behind. So I want to sort of walk through the evolution for those people who are still, brand new to AI. I mean, most people start out as almost like a Google.
Right.
And then what's the progression? What do you see as a progression?
I'll tell you, I think what the biggest problem is, and I actually put this in my newsletter that goes out tomorrow. The biggest problem is it's a wide open world of AI, especially with the videos, with the speakerless YouTube videos that you could create at massive scale, and all the content you could create for websites, and all the coding you could do. There's so much potential out there that it feels like you're drinking from a fire hose. What you really need to do is identify what is it that you need, one thing, and focus on just getting that one thing done. And that thing may take 15 iterations. I'll give you a perfect example to everybody who's listening. I have an idea of something that I want to do in my mastermind. It's a end of the year sprint. We're going to do 8 private coaching sessions with people over 4 months, and we're going to have a goal and that type of thing. And I said, I know I could get AI to help me develop the curriculum and the offering and the emails that'll go out and all that other stuff. And it took 37 revisions in Claude to be able to come out with the final product. But now I have all the scripted emails, I have the agenda, I have the worksheets, I have everything. And it took me probably, an afternoon to get all that stuff done, 37 revisions. But the problem is that it wouldn't have started until I said, I'd like to build a 4-month program for my mastermind. And I have my AI has been trained on my mastermind and has access to documents. I said, what documents have I already created that can help me build this thing? And AI started accessing my stuff, and we had a conversation. Ask me 30 questions about my goal, and ask me 10 questions about what my client should get out of it. And so really, you just got to start with one thing and try to do that one thing. So if you're in PI, maybe you like the idea of having a client, like, how did the injury hurt you? How did the injury affect your life? Interview. Well, you could do that. Have them fill that out, and then prompt AI to create the story so that you could read that to the jury. Here's what they say in their own words, that type of thing. Maybe that's the one thing you could start with. Don't try to do a million things all at once. Don't tell your staff, here, I want you to do medcrons with it. I want you to do, one. Pick one thing. Master that one thing, because while you're doing that one thing, you're going to be getting skills that you could use to do more things. And that's really the most important thing. I didn't come with my mitigation prompt until I was 2 years into using AI. Now we have it set up with a provider where we will trigger a text message to our client, and they will say, do you want to answer this in a form, or do you want us to call you? And we have an AI agent that will call the client and talk them through the thing. And they'll talk to them in Spanish or in French or in English or in Portuguese, whatever language that they need. and then they'll translate the answers to us, send it to us, and then we could use that to drop it into a Google Drive, which automatically goes to Claude with the correct prompt, and then creates that and then emails that to us so that we have it. But I didn't start with that. I started with, hey, I bet you Claude could do a better job writing a narrative than I could. Hey, Chat GPT, what questions should I be asking for this? And you'll get that out of them even better.
What you just went through sounds amazing and also intimidating as hell. The thing is, so I listen to people like you, and I'm like, holy crap, I'm so far behind. I need to remember that there's 80%, 90% of the people are behind me.
There's 99.9% of the people that are behind you. I mean, that's the reality. Amazing. I mean, my father loves the client narratives. He's still practicing at 76. He's like, this is amazing. I've been practicing for 48 years. I've never had something this good to advocate for my client. I love it. He loves the byproduct. He's not actively doing it because I've automated the whole thing, but he loves the output and can use that at court for sure.
So let me ask about some of the automation. What tools do you use to help automate the AI stuff?
So I've just been using the native integrations with Claude and with Google Drive and with Gmail. We're using Zapier for some things. In fact, I need to email Zapier to do a OpenAI connection for me because they don't have what they need built natively, but they will set it up for you. So, I mean, it's really just using the native tools. I know Dan Schnuderbush uses make.com a lot. I'm old, I'm over 50. So Zapier or Zapier, however it's pronounced. I mean, it's a French company, so I would think it'd be Zapier, but everyone says Zapier. I just, stick with what I know. And that's part of the product. My MailChimp account for my law firm is probably a mess because I've had it for 20 years. The new MailChimp account for the mastermind is so much cleaner and nicer. I stick with the tools that work rather than try to invest in it. And I think that's the other thing too. Too many people just love to buy things as a lawyer because they think they're buying a magic wand. There is no magic wand. You have to do the work, or you have to understand to do the work. Joey Vitale makes a great point that when you have a problem, there's two solutions. You can either learn what the problem is and how to fix it. And even if you don't fix it yourself, you understand it, or you could just throw money at it and make that not a problem for today. The problem is that there's always going to be problems and you're going to have to throw more and more money at it. So in reality, it's better to learn and know, okay, I know I can understand the concepts. Maybe I don't have to be the one to executing it. I had a problem with Google Analytics last month, and I said to my marketing, I said, we could do this. We could figure this out. We can get somebody on Upwork and they can have it done in an hour. Let's just pay somebody because I want to move forward.
So Jay, you've been very kind, and I have probably about 3 hours more of questions, and we don't have time for that. So
I can go as long as
I do have a few. I do have a few that I want to make sure I ask you. Okay. So we had talked about this offline, but I'm curious. Is there a sort of a strong opinion or life philosophy that you have that you live by?
Yes, I do. And I try to teach it to my kids, and I tell everybody that I interact with that this is my philosophy. As humans, we have the infinite capacity for only two things. That is love, and that is knowledge. You should seek out as much of them as you possibly can. That's
beautiful. That's beautiful. And AI can never replace that. So
that's true. That's true. I mean, the reality is that at the end of the day, people connect with people. I mean, if I can use AI to allow me to connect with more people, I win all around. I'm using a tool that's out there, and I think we could all do better connecting. We come into our offices, our door gets shut, we put our head down and we do work as lawyers, but people look to lawyers to solve problems they can't solve themselves. And that's really, a challenge that we have, and it's an honorable profession to have. So I think we could really do better by each other, for sure.
So I do have another question before we go there. You've written a number of books.
Yep.
Are there any you want to plug? I've read Tiger Tactics. I guess I read the first one. I think there's a second one.
There is. I'll ship you out a copy. I actually just released a book last week, Connecticut Trial Handbook. That was helped me. It's funny. I started it during COVID. I had written a book back in 2014, the DUI Trial Handbook, just to sort of keep building my name in DUI. And I said in COVID, I was going to do work on that and update it. And it went from being, 200 pages to 450 pages. And I couldn't get it over the finish line. And I said a month ago, shit, I could just have Claude, help me out, reformulate a couple of these chapters. And I put the right prompt in. I used ChatGPT and Claude, melded them together. I got the book out. It's available online now, the Connecticut Criminal Trial Handbook. And I did that knowing that I would be able to use some benefit as being known as the author of this criminal trial handbook in Connecticut. I would get some love on the internet because of it. I also wrote the one-day MBA for lawyers because I had been looking for something like that for years, and there really wasn't anything out there. So back in December, I said, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I used ChatGPT. I said, I want to write a book called The One-Day MBA for Lawyers. Give me 12 chapters. What should the book be? So it gave me the 12 chapters. I said, now outline the chapters for me. So I basically had the entire book outlined by ChatGPT. And then I was able to just sit down and just type away because I knew all the stuff to answer those questions. And I got the book done in like a day and a half of just sitting at a keyboard and banging it out. So,
Wow.
I'm just last week, I said, I have an idea for another book. So I got another one that's going to come out in July. And it's kind of crazy seeing my name on all these books. But, as a nerdy,
Beautiful.
high school kid who just wanted to write a book, I got a bunch out there. I still have to do some fiction, but I have an idea for that. I started writing one when I was in law school. So I may try to use AI to help me finish that out.
So I'm curious. I'm in the middle of a book for myself, and it'll come out hopefully by early October. I'm curious, what sort of impact has that had on you, your practice, your life, whatever?
Well,
anything you can point out?
Well, for Tiger Tactics, for that series of books, it introduced me to an amazing group of other lawyer entrepreneurs that are out there. Got me a bunch of speaking gigs to audiences that I wouldn't otherwise have been in front of. And I enjoy helping other people. I grew up, I'm not very religious, but I went to a Jesuit high school and Jesuit college. And so I believe in their philosophy of being a man for others and giving back as much as you can. So that's really what steers me. And if I could write a book and be honest about the struggles that I've had, maybe somebody else who's in those struggles says, okay, these are not insurmountable. They are just part of the process. And so, when you look back, you say, oh God, that hill looks so large, but I got over it. And now it doesn't look so large. And that's really what I want to encourage people to do. Like, you can do this. You're smart. If you got into law school, if you passed the bar, you're smart enough to do most of these things. You're smart enough to understand what your marketing vendor is trying to do for you. And you owe it to yourself to actually learn enough about that you can have an intelligent conversation, because you can't just say, go do it, because that's when you get ripped off, right? So you want to know a little bit. You want to have like a T level of knowledge. You go deep in an area, but you have a wide variety of knowledge going across the top. I think I probably have I'm more like a W. I go up and down in multiple sections.
I love it. So Jay, as an outside observer, you've had an incredible run as a legal entrepreneur. You've done a ton of stuff. We've talked about some of it. There's a ton we didn't talk about. But as you sit here today and you're looking forward, what's the vision for the next 10, 15 years? What is it that you haven't done yet that you want to do?
Really, my vision I only have 8 more years in practice. I announced that 2 years ago. I do a State of the Union type of speech every December when we end the year to my whole team. And I announced that when I turn 62, I'm retiring. And so I announced that because I wanted to hold myself accountable. I only have 8 more annual meetings left. And I'm purposely now building my firm to function and survive without me. Last year, 2024, we had 7 babies born to my office among all of the people. And they all are younger mothers and fathers who need to know that they have a secure job for the next 30, 40 years. So my job over the next 8 is to make it so that this firm can sustain their life in a way that they want. And they're not looking for a job in 9 years or 10 years. I want them to be able to take the keys to this car and continue to drive it. And so I'm doing everything possible to make that happen. I'm relying on my leadership team to make decisions more and more. I'm deferring to them to make decisions. One of the main reasons why I built the Criminal Mastermind and I record everything is so that I can give it to my leadership team and say, here, we've covered that in one of our sessions with an expert. And so you can listen to this when you have that problem. And, like Emily and Teresa, who will take over running this firm along with the other people, they're going to have 20, 30 years ahead of them being able to run a firm that is set up for them to do that. And I have full confidence in them. So it's really kind of just me allowing myself to get out of the way. And I'm excited for that. And then come 8 more years, my daughter graduates from high school and I'm done.
I love the goal and I love the public declaration. I think that's key. That's key. Most people forget that part and it just drags on.
Well, if you don't say it out loud, it's not true. I mean, it's just, you got to commit to something. And I have goals for when I am retired, things I want to do that I'm building in now so that I am able to do them. And that's what it's all about. It's finding the next thing that really, really inspires you, lights your soul on fire. I don't define myself as just a lawyer. And if you do, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with being like, I just want to be a lawyer. And if that's the case, run towards that. Be the best lawyer you could possibly be in your subject matter. Become nationally or internationally known. Take every class you can get. Start teaching the classes. Really embrace it. If that's what you want to be, go for it. I encourage you. Because if that fulfills you, man, you should be doing it. But don't do anything half-assed. That's the takeaway.
So Jay, for somebody out there that wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
You can shoot me an email, Jay@Ruane Attorneys or Jay@thecriminalmastermind.com. Either one of those will get to me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I don't do that much compared to what I used to. I thought there are no criminal defense lawyers in great capacity on LinkedIn. I don't know why, but there's a lot of civil lawyers that are engaged in it. So I'm there. I'll post things, but you can get me on LinkedIn. You can get me on any of the social platforms, usually at Jay Ruane, JayRuane. But shoot me an email. I'm happy to connect with anybody that's out there.
Well, Jay, man, this has been great. I've enjoyed this. Thank you for coming on. I look forward to meeting you in person
this is great.
Soon.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to get together at some event. As my kids get a little older, and my daughter starts driving, like we talked about before coming on the air, I'll be able to escape more and get back on the seminar circuit. So I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.